The glitter of a country stage can fool even the sharpest eye into believing the genre is all moonlit dances, truck bed first kisses, and feel-good fiddles. Yet behind those bright lights sits a darker backroom where legends pace the floor, chewing on heartbreak the crowd will never witness. Across 80 years of Nashville history, a silent procession of stars have slipped through that backstage door and never come back, choosing to end their own stories rather than sing another encore. Their songs still spin on dusty jukeboxes and sleek streaming apps alike, but few listeners understand the price written between the lines. Tonight we pull back that velvet curtain. This isn't a morbid tally. It's a human chronicle of pressure, expectation, and untreated pain. From honky-tonk pioneers who drank themselves toward the edge to modern hopefuls crushed by viral-era scrutiny, each tale exposes how fame can amplify wounds it pretends to heal. Listen closely, because in every verse of triumph there echoes a chorus of despair that often goes unsung until it is too late. By the end of this journey, you may never hear a steel guitar the same way again, and that new awareness might save a life down the line. Remember, these artists were not cautionary cartoons. They were neighbors, parents, and friends whose craft gave us comfort while offering them fleeting relief. Their missteps do not erase their melodies, nor should their endings eclipse their beginnings. Instead, let their journeys remind us that even the strongest chorus can hide a quiver of doubt. As you travel through the upcoming stories, keep an open heart. Someone you love might be humming these unspoken blues, hoping somebody hears them. Long before anyone talked about streaming numbers or crossover charts, Hank Williams proved that commercial glory and private agony can ride the same tour bus. Barely out of his 20s, he penned hymns of loneliness so universal they still soundtrack breakups today. Yet the man who wrote them could not outrun the bottles that blurred his vision and the spinal pain that clawed his back. On New Year's Day, 1953, a teenage college student discovered his idol lifeless in the rear seat of a powder blue Cadillac, a syringe, pills, and half-scribbled lyrics rattling around the floorboard. Coroners called it heart failure, fans called it fate. But friends whispered that Hank had been quietly offing himself with every swallow long before the car ever left the driveway. That brutal template, genius dulled by addiction, haunted the next generation of players, none more tragic than Farron Young. Nicknamed the Young Sheriff, Farron swaggered across the Grand Ole Opry in rhinestone holsters, yet by the mid-1990s his chart slots vanished, diabetes gnawed his legs, and Music Row executives stopped calling. Young burned bridges in interviews, accusing country radio of ageism, then retreated to his Nashville home lined with fading gold records. On December 10, 1996, he placed a .38 revolver to his temple and pulled the trigger, leaving a note apologizing to his children for what he called an industry-bred humiliation. From Williams's forlorn backseat to Young's silent living room, the message was stark. Applause cannot drown out internal static forever. The echoes of their exits haunt ballads that followed, shaping country music's mythology. Where Williams and Young embodied raw honky-tonk heartbreak, Tom T. Hall and Gene McClellan crafted quieter ballads that masked deeper storms. Hall, affectionately branded the storyteller, narrated rural life with such detail that fans felt he was reading their diaries back to them. Behind closed doors, the 79-year-old battled neuropathy, rumors of early dementia, and the silence of pandemic isolation. On August 20, 2021, deputies arrived at his Tennessee farm after a single gunshot shattered the cicadas. Reports said he fired one round into his own head while a note sat nearby asking for forgiveness. 2 decades earlier, across Prince Edward Island, songwriter Gene McClellan paced the shoreline fighting equally relentless demons. He had gifted the world Snowbird, but depression shadowed him like a gull over tidal flats. Hospitalized repeatedly, McClellan returned home on a January night in 1995 and ended his life by hanging, leaving a half-finished notebook of gospel lyrics on the kitchen table. His family later revealed the notebook's theme: hope. It is cruel irony that writers who sculpted hope for millions could not grasp a shard for themselves, yet that contradiction makes their music linger. Hall's spoken-word anecdotes and McClellan's breezy melodies now feel like SOS signals we failed to decode in time, a reminder that eloquence is not immunity. Next time you hum Harper Valley PTA or Put Your Hand in the Hand, think about the authors pleading through those melodies for somebody, anybody to notice the cracks. The 1970s welcomed a harder-edged honky-tonk sound, and with it arrived two artists whose lyrics bled autobiography, Mel Street and Eddie Noak. Street's deep baritone on Borrowed Angel could make a dive bar feel like Sunday service, yet outside the studio he wrestled escalating alcoholism, debts, and a label that dangled fame as leverage. On October 21, 1978, his 45th birthday, he closed himself in the garage, placed a revolver to his chest, and fired while his newest single climbed the chart. Friends say the chart position intensified despair because he feared failing to live up to it. Eddie Noak, meanwhile, became a cult figure for writing Psycho, a song so chilling many stations refused to air it. Behind the notoriety lay financial ruin, rumored pill addiction, and the crushing fact that brilliant songwriting didn't always buy groceries. By February 1978, he lay dead on his apartment floor under circumstances still debated. The coroner called it hemorrhage. Insiders whispered overdose, possibly self-inflicted. Street and Noak never met, yet their lives formed parallel lines, brief peaks of acclaim followed by merciless descents. Both men left cryptic notebooks stuffed with unrealized hooks, proof creativity doesn't die when hope does. Next time a jukebox croons their melodies, remember the cost of those bent notes and how many unfinished verses remain locked inside quiet rooms along Music Row. The bottle has always been both prop and predator in country music, and Keith Whitley may be its most heartbreaking cautionary tale. Blessed with a tenor smoother than Kentucky bourbon, Whitley carried childhood memories of funerals and a touring schedule that rewarded self-medication. By May 1989, his blood alcohol level registered .47, nearly 6 times the legal limit, turning his bloodstream into lighter fluid. Whether the binge was miscalculation or slow self-erasure is debated, but the result was the same. A superstar silenced at 34, 2 unfinished albums in limbo. 14 years later, Gary Stewart, whose vibrato-powered She's Actin' single, faced grief whiskey couldn't drown. His wife of 43 years died unexpectedly, and less than a month later he sat alone in their condo, pressed a handgun to his neck, and fired. Friends reported he had been rewriting love songs into laments as though rehearsing the goodbye. Rumor claims Stewart begged his label to postpone a comeback tour, but was told contractual penalties would bankrupt him. Confronted with collapse and pressure, he chose the exit he could control. Whitley and Stewart remind us addiction often begins as anesthesia for trauma and ends as a self-authored obituary. Their velocities differed, yet both crashed into the same wall, a culture that applauds vulnerability on stage but shames it elsewhere. Still, when their recordings surface on playlists, new listeners fall in love without sensing the ticking clock beneath each lyric. That haunting disconnect forces fans to ask, are we celebrating the art or feeding the despair that created it? Every single day. If the previous tragedies felt distant, Naomi Judd's death hit like a vinyl crackle in surround sound, sharp, immediate, impossible to ignore. For decades, she stood on arena stages beside daughter Wynonna, preaching perseverance while harmonizing through autoimmune pain and what she labeled the dark twin of depression. In April 2022, one day before Hall of Fame induction, Naomi used a handgun in her bedroom, ending a battle fought mostly in secret. Tabloids speculated on estate disputes, and a police leak of graphic details sparked a family lawsuit, reigniting debate over privacy and voyeurism. The controversy overshadowed a memoir where Naomi chronicled therapies, medications, and the internal critic she named My Judge. Her daughters tour a documentary refuting feud rumors, emphasizing advocacy for trauma survivors and her generosity toward struggling artists. Naomi's story cuts deeper because it unfolded in real time across social feeds. Fans watched the induction ceremony with her empty chair draped in roses, an image turning grief into spectacle. Every replay of "Love Can Build a Bridge" feels like a plea directed inward, urging the singer herself to cross. That bridge collapsed, but its blueprint remains for anyone willing to confront mental illness without shame. Her legacy sings louder than loss, yet loss ensures we never confuse a glowing smile with happiness. For a generation raised on anthems, realizing their matriarch could not save herself was a thunderclap. Hotlines logged a spike in callers referencing her, a sign that even in death, Naomi continued to pull strangers back from the brink. Mental illness has no respect for chronology, and the tragedies of Luke Bell and Vic Chestnut prove the crisis remains painfully contemporary. Bell, a Wyoming drifter with a yodel lifted from 1950, vanished from a Tucson street in August 2022 after slipping from a hotel while adjusting new bipolar meds. 9 days later, cowboys found him under a mesquite tree, lost to fentanyl toxicity and exposure. Officials ruled it accidental, but his family believed he had ended his own life, arguing untreated psychosis pushed him toward lethal risk. Social media erupted. How can an artist who charmed Austin dives collapse undetected in the smartphone era? 13 years before Bell's disappearance, Athens songwriter Vic Chestnut overdosed on muscle relaxants in bed on Christmas Day. Paralyzed from the waist down since 17, he wrote wry confessionals that danced between dread and absurdity. Medical bills topping $70,000 compounded despair. He told NPR weeks earlier he was drowning. Chestnut died believing eviction imminent. What unites these men is the societal shrug that followed. Tweets and think pieces circulated, yet funding for musician mental health programs barely budged. Their absences echo at indie festivals where performers hang guitars backstage, whispering, "It could be me next," before stepping forward. And still the ticket lines grow, crowds cheer, and the cycle spins, because hope and heartbreak have always shared a microphone. Each encore masks a roulette wheel, and every ovation ends when house lights rise to reveal how many players limped off stage back, yet not every dark chapter ends in silence. In recent years, a handful of headline names have stepped beyond the stage to drag these conversations into daylight, proving that transparency can tour just as loudly as any platinum single. When Chris Stapleton paused mid-set in 2019 to tell a sold-out arena he was taking therapy as seriously as tuning a guitar, ticket holders erupted. Not because the confession was dramatic, but because it felt like permission. A month later, Casey Musgraves launched her Mind Like a Kaleidoscope initiative, partnering with smaller venues to keep on-site counselors available for artists and crew. Even stalwarts of the old guard have joined in. Garth Brooks funds quiet treatment scholarships through MusiCares, while Reba McEntire films PSA spots that air between segments of her live show. These acts don't erase the pain documented earlier, yet they tilt the industry toward acknowledging basic human limits. Whisper networks once used to gossip about breakdowns are being repurposed into mutual aid groups where session players swap hotline numbers instead of tabloid rumors. Independent labels have begun inserting wellness clauses into contracts, promising short-notice hiatuses without financial punishment. The change is slow and often cosmetic, but it exists. And for road warriors who spend 250 nights a year inhaling exhaust fumes and cheap neon, even a single breath of sanctioned self-care can be the difference between another verse and a final rest note. Fans, too, wield newfound leverage. Live stream audiences flood chat boxes with supportive messages when a performer admits to panic attacks, drowning out trolls who once dictated the tone. In this fragile momentum lies a blueprint radically different from the one our early icons followed. The old mythology demanded martyrs. The new one, if we nurture it, might finally make room for survivors. The new millennium promised healthier dialogues, but January 2025 shattered that illusion when Ryan White Maloney, a charismatic tenor who once turned chairs on The Voice, reportedly shot himself in his Las Vegas home. Police logs described unpaid medical bills, stalled studio talks, and a foreclosure notice taped to the door. Friends claimed Maloney recorded a concept album only to have the label shelve it over algorithmic market concerns. A week before his death, he tweeted, "Doing fine," masking despair behind a winking emoji. Fans read resilience. In hindsight, it was a goodbye line break. Within hours, TikTok duet chains exploded, artists harmonizing with his isolated vocals in grief-stricken tribute. Yet the same algorithms that suppressed his release ruthlessly monetize joy and mourning alike, and creators pay either way. Maloney's passing forced a question onto every singer live streaming from a bedroom studio. If public validation arrives one click too late, what happens to the person behind the screen? Advocacy groups are lobbying for mental health clauses in recording contracts, citing his name in draft legislation. Some insiders scoff, insisting the business thrives on risk. But for every skeptic, there is an artist replaying Maloney's blind audition clip, wondering whether chasing that dream comes with an expiration date and how high the toll will climb before someone calls it. While most stories focus on self-inflicted endings, Spade Kulie illustrates an equally grim trajectory. Talent curdled into violence. Dubbed the king of Western swing, Kulie headlined sold-out arenas, but behind the grin he nursed paranoia that his wife was unfaithful. In 1961, he beat her to death before their teenage daughter, an act so monstrous that even a genre famous for cheatin' songs recoiled. Sentenced to life, Kulie collapsed from a heart attack backstage during a prison benefit in 1969, dying under spotlights that once deified him. His fall forces an uncomfortable truth. Unchecked ego, addiction, and misogyny can weaponize fame against families artists claim to sing for. Gatekeepers responded by erasing him from retrospectives, as though deletion equals absolution, but historians argue burying ugly chapters guarantees their repetition. Every time a modern star faces abuse allegations, critics recall Kulie's ghost, and executives scramble to protect brands rather than victims. Survivors from that era say Nashville's silence spoke louder than tabloids. Colleagues skipped the widow's grave, therapy never arrived for the daughter, and royalty checks funded studio budgets. Streaming services muted those tracks only after petitions mounted. Does country heal hearts, or sometimes break them and cash the dividend? Remembering Kulie in full color is the first step toward answering honestly, because if music is society's mirror, shattered reflections teach the harshest lessons. So where does this leave us, the listeners who hum along while washing dishes or driving down dimly lit highways? The stories you heard are not museum relics. They are caution signs blinking right now. Country music thrives on authenticity, yet the industry often treats vulnerability as marketing mulch, useful until the blooms wilt, then swept aside. The pattern will repeat unless the audience demands better. That means supporting mental health funds, challenging myths equating stoicism with strength, and recognizing red flag lyrics as invitations for empathy rather than viral fodder. When you stream a heartbreak anthem, imagine the songwriter sitting across a kitchen table deciding whether to pick up a guitar or a gun, send a message, buy the merch, tip at the show. Each small gesture can tilt the scale. Fandom can be more than spectatorship. It can be intervention. If one of these names sparked memories or tears tonight, let that push you toward action. Donate to MusiCares or a hotline when possible. Share resources in fan forums instead of gossip. Normalize therapy check-ins during studio sessions the way engineers adjust reverb. Talk openly about depression, trauma, and the weight of expectations. Silence helped build the graveyard we toured. Conversation can build a safer stage. The genre's greatest gift is storytelling. Let's write the next chapter on living parchment, not headstones. Because the next voice cracking on stage might belong to someone you love, and the chorus you shout back could be the lifeline that keeps them here for another verse.